Welcome, everybody, to a special meeting of the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors, March 16, 2020. I would like to ask everyone to join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So, thank you everybody for being here today under these extraordinary circumstances. And I will first of all ask CAO if there is any change to the agenda.
There are some modifications to the actual agenda item, but I can go over those when we get to that, but there are no modifications to the overall agenda.
Thank you. And to County Council?
Chair, just a procedural issue. I would recommend that the clerk of the board take a roll call vote since we have a supervisor calling in, so there's a record.
Excellent. So welcome, Supervisor Wilson.
I'm here, sort of.
Thank you. Okay. So when we make when we take any vote, we'll make it a roll call vote. With that, we'll go to departmental reports, and that is from the County Administrative Officer. Oh, excuse me, we will have public comment on items that are not on the agenda.
Ken Sawatsky, they say that one thing that leads to the contagion of this is stress. So I brought forward something for you to see here. It's something that I found entertaining and relaxing to me, probably not to the bird it is. But the copy of what I have here was on Craigslist, and it basically says free bird, and I thought I'd show you this. It happened. My daughter-in-law, who loves birds, thought it was extremely funny, my granddaughter. So anyway, it's a little bit of what's happening out there in our world today. Very interesting times. We will discuss a major topic here in a little while. There's questions that have been asked to me in advance, and it's hopefully you will get information out to the public in a timely manner, such as I'm guessing we're not going to have physical presence at any kind of road show this year, since that, I don't know if that's scheduled or how that's working. But I'm going to ask you folks to make
excuse me, Mr. Sawatsky, but the whole coronavirus response is what's on the agenda today, so.
Sure, well, I'm okay. I'll talk a little bit more about that then, so I'll switch over to litigation.
Thank you.
So HumMap had litigation. The litigation was taken forward, and the one thing that was not dealt with by our local attorney was whether you could tax a federal criminal activity or not. It's an interesting question. And my guess is, since it most likely will be appealed, most likely a venue change will be sought, or this will be brought forward into federal court to have that determination made by a federal court judge. And then we'll know, won't we, whether that you can go ahead and tax or can't tax a federal criminal activity. We'll also know a little bit more about if you can't tax it and you have been, what happens to proceeds from that tax. Most likely those will be confiscated by the federal government at one time. Major recommendations were used to use that tax for the purpose of law enforcement, to be given to Billy to eliminate the criminal activity. But of course, we're using it for all kinds of things. The other thing I would see possibly happening is, until that's sorted out, your funds will be frozen. The county's funds will be frozen because you've commingled those funds in your general fund. And until such time as a forensic shoebox audit determines how much those amounts were, also the amount of money that have been engaged in what I call money laundering by your multiple departments, especially your planning and building, where you've received large sums of cash. And obviously the testimony that we've had before in this forum is that we know that that cash was not necessarily generated from legal means. In fact, probably the opposite's true. So it'll be interesting times to see how this all develops. It will be interesting to see where this funding goes. It will be interesting to see the repercussions of being complicit to such activities. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go back to the board, and now we will go to the County Administrative Office for a look at county considerations related to employee procedures, leave accruals, and telecommuting in response to COVID-19.
Yes, thank you, Chair Fennell. Before your board today is a resolution that addresses employee procedures, leave accruals, and working remotely in response to COVID-19. Since the agenda was posted, additional modifications have been made to both the resolution and Exhibit A, which is the interim policy for remote working. The modification to the resolution is on page 2, number 7, and the following sentence has been added. Essential functions include services necessary to maintain court operations, which will continue unless a directive to the contrary is issued by the state. A modification has also been made to Exhibit A. The first paragraph after the bullets now includes the following: and to adopt policies and procedures regarding any necessary expenditures of telecommuting employees. Also in the interim policy for remote working, under the section titled Short-Term Telecommuting, the following has been added to the 4th line and as described in their continuation of operation plan. Moving back to the resolution provides that effective immediately, county employees shall receive an advance of 80 hours of sick leave. The resolution also provides that employees may use any of their benefit time for issues related to COVID-19. County employees who miss time from work because they have been medically diagnosed with COVID-19 will be placed on paid administrative leave if they have exhausted their benefit time. County departments shall proactively take considerations to remove vulnerable employees from scenarios that put them at higher risk, such as moving vulnerable employees to workstations that do not require them to interact frequently with the public. At department head discretion, departments may close and or limit in-person interactions with members of the public and staff, provided that alternative procedures such as telephonic or web-based services are available. In order to protect members of the public and staff and the broader community, if members of the public appear at a county facility and present symptoms of COVID-19, county staff may require that they do not enter the facility, provided that staff can deliver, again, services in alternative method or procedures such as via telephone or through web-based means. And department heads shall exercise their continuity of operations plans and modify them where necessary to ensure that they have appropriate staffing and resources to carry out their essential functions during this emergency time. And that concludes the staff report. Oh, in addition, there's also the interim policy for remote working, which delineates expectations for staff, data security, and expectations for supervisors as well. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you, CAO. Nilsen, are there any comments from the board before we go to staff? Supervisor Madrone and Supervisor Bohn?
So it just says employees. It doesn't differentiate between full-time, part-time, temporary, additional help. So does this cover all employees? That's the way it reads right now. That would include temporary, part-time, and additional help.
Correct.
So they would all, even though they normally don't accrue any leave at all, they would be forwarded 80 hours of leave?
Correct.
How does that work for an individual that doesn't accrue leave at all?
So payroll has the ability to place leave into an extra help person's leave bank. So that is definitely possible, and a lot of counties are relying on their extra help or temporary help during this period of time. So we can do that.
Okay, so it spans the gamut, basically.
Yes.
I think that's a wise thing to do. I suspect that those that do accrue leave may have issues, although at this point in time, we really have to drop all kinds of issues in order to do the right thing here. But I'm sure some of them may have issues of, wow, that was leave I was planning on using X, Y, Z. It just, equity issues may come up at some point, but for right now, I think this is the right thing to do. So, thank you.
Supervisor Bohn?
Well, I think a majority of this is fronting them the 80 hours of sick leave. So hopefully they're not planning on using their sick leave later on down the line for anything else but being sick. So I agree with that. Are we going to be able to discuss what we're gonna do for our non-employees, like businesses and stuff today, or is that gonna come up at a different time? Basically, delay tax payments for 45 days or anything like that, which I know nobody wants to talk about, but we have businesses left and right closing down who aren't gonna be able to make their tax payments, or maybe waiving the late fee. I don't know how to do this, but
So I think that's a conversation at a later date, because this particular agenda item is
Okay.
focused on county employees. Economic development is definitely researching options, because they have the same concerns that you do, Supervisor Bohn. So folks could reach out to economic development for assistance.
well, and the SB, they had, but their site crashed, so nobody could get through it today. I talked to both our state reps today, and they are working on something. They were kind of waiting to see what the U.S. Senate did today on their vote, which was still taking place. So they're trying to see what the trickle down is, but it might be a good time that we put pressure on them to maybe look at that $18.5 billion surplus to help the people that helped them get them there. So we do have some businesses that are probably going to be hurting, but I think we're going to have guidelines to that also. But I think we're at is taking care of our employees, even our extra help and everything else, which are so important to do in our duty here. We better look at the people that are paying the bills. So when this is all over in 2 months, 4 months, or whichever number you're going to believe, that they're still here to pay some taxes and provide employment.
So it occurs to me that we will have a presentation tomorrow also on the, at our board meeting from the Department of Health and Human Services, and, you know, we might make some more general discussion at that time in terms of our response to COVID. I know that on the way here, I was listening to the President's task force on a press conference, and they're reducing the numbers now of gatherings to 10. But there's also, it seems to me that teamwork is the word of the hour, and governors and the federal government working well together. I know that CSEC's also working on potentially outreaching to the feds in terms of those kinds of things, SBA and all of that. So, this is something that's moving forward very, very quickly. But I think if we just stay focused on each item as we go forward, we probably do pretty good. It seems to me now that a good question would be to hear from the department heads and your take on the proposed resolution, if there's anything that you see is not covered by it. And so I'd invite anybody who wants to come up to talk with us about what's going on in your departments and what your needs and concerns are. Don't all rush to the mic at the same time. Might as well start, okay. Welcome, Director Ford.
Thank you, Sheriff Fennell, members of the board, John Ford, Director of Planning and Building. One of the things we are looking at is continuity of services, especially related to our public interface that happens primarily at the public counter. We take in a lot of applications. We have a lot of public engagement. We see a lot of material that comes in over the counter. And frankly, it worries staff during this period. One of the things that we're looking at, particularly in light of the resolution that you have that would give the director the ability to close that interface, provided that alternative services are provided, is to begin to have all questions either responded to electronically or by phone, so that the interface won't stop. It'll just happen through a different media. And secondly is to continue to accept all applications electronically, so that we don't have to have the public face-to-face interface, and we don't have to worry about what's on something that's being submitted. The one difficulty that we have there is with respect to financial transactions. And what we're contemplating doing, assuming that the board approves the resolution today, is that if we can't get the payment by credit card over the phone, then we will just catch up with the payments, the financial transactions, at a later date. We'll still allow people to apply for things, We will bring everything in, provided everything else is complete. We will continue to process and then collect fees and things later. I think this will allow us to provide the continuity of service that is necessary for the applications for permits and things that are already in. We are going to continue to process those, and I think what we're going to do is establish an appointment-based ability for people to come in and pick up their permits. And so that will continue to provide the continuity of service. Be happy to answer any questions. We thank you for taking a leadership role and getting out in front of this.
Do you have any concerns with regard to hearings that might be upcoming?
Thank you. Yes. Particularly this week, we have one before the Board of Supervisors tomorrow. It's an appeal for an application down in Garberville. And it is likely to attract a large number of people. And it would be hard to envision this room having spacing to accommodate that. We also have a Planning Commission meeting on Thursday evening that has an item on it that would affect the most vulnerable portion of our community. And really, I think it would be prudent under those circumstances to not hold that hearing in particular. But with that being said, it may be worth not having a Planning Commission hearing at all. And thirdly is zoning administrator items. One of the things we're exploring is whether or not we could have that hearing without having people show up. If there's nobody that's going to show up and protest anything, or if the applicants don't need to be there and things are typically done on consent anyway, we could do that. But in situations where there is public concern, if we could find out about that, and we're trying to make phone calls about that right now, that then we would continue those items. But realistically, requiring people to come to public hearings seems to be counterintuitive to what we're trying to do in terms of creating the personal space.
Thank you, Director Ford. Supervisor Bohn?
It's March, so some of these people that are bringing these things kind of need to either get to work or not get to work. So I think what we probably could do is work with IT, limit how many people are in the room, set up a TV in another room, and funnel the people through 6 at a time. They speak, take 6 out, 6 come in, and we keep a couple seats separation, because this isn't going to be done in a week. It's not going to be done in 2 weeks. It's not going to be done in 4 weeks. So we better start looking at worst case scenario, better than a best case scenario, and figure out if we've got 1 or 2 rooms that we can do video from, and then call people in and say, okay, once you've spoken, you're out, you're not here for the whole time, and then bring in other people in. Only other option is the extreme is going to a much larger room, but that's it. We've already tried that, and it's pretty time consuming, and the effort's pretty extreme, and I don't think we've probably got that room set up yet. So I think we could probably work something out and use a couple of the rooms to put people in and out. That's going to be cumbersome too, but I don't think most everything we're deciding, whether it's going to be a garage or a fourplex or a 10,000 square foot grow, are all economic drivers. And I think once we stop the economics, we're going to, create a bigger boondoggle than we've already got going. So I think that's probably what I would plan on to limiting this room to 15, 20 people, spreading them out, and then 15 or 20 or 15 or 20.
So one of the things I discussed with the CAO prior to this meeting is that, we wanted, for sure, if we are going to keep on having meetings here, to encourage social distancing. I see a couple of people sitting right next to each other, and I'd like to ask you to make some separation, if you wouldn't mind. Although if you live together, I guess that's okay. You're used to. But the other thing is, I think what I also heard in the president's press conference today is we could be looking anywhere out until July or August to really deal with this. However, the immediate guidelines are going out for 15 days. So I think somewhere along the line, we are going to have to look at telephonically and over the internet conducting meetings, but we're not there yet. I think that's something we also would be discussing at a further meeting. Supervisor Bass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure many people saw today that several counties are instituting mandatory, sheltering in place. Of course, when you read it, it's kind of squishy, it's not real exact. But I'm curious how, maybe through CIO, what would be determined as essential county business? These meetings, I agree with, Director Ford, that it'd be tough to do in here. I also agree with Supervisor Bohn that it seems like there's a way to work through it. But, when all is said and done, does that count as an essential business? And I don't know who is the one that's supposed to make that.
So your board adopted a continuity of government plan, and so each department has a very specific continuity of operations plan where they go through every function that they perform, and they are ranked on level of importance. And so during times of local emergency, only essential functions are what your board should be considering as necessary. And essential functions typically relate to 24/7 facilities like the jail, like Supervisors, like juvenile hall. There are other departments like the district attorney and the public defender that are also essential functions because they're based very much on the court schedule and what is required through the courts. Now, if the courts makes a change to their operations, then that would give some flexibility to the district attorneys and the public defenders. But there are continuity of operation plans, and departments have already looked at those essential functions.
And so I guess my question would be to Director Ford, is this considered amongst the essential functions of?
The Planning and Building Department has two essential functions. Number one, to maintain the GIS system. Number two, to maintain building inspections.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add as a note that as far as the economy is concerned, the nation and the world are looking at that issue too. So if we're drilling down and this is an emergency at a federal, state, and local level, that's our first order of business. CAO Billingson. CAO Council. Okay, you guys want to switch chairs?
Through the chair, in response to Supervisor Bass, some of these things are statutory, and we've seen the state, for instance, with the Brown Act, has already put in some emergency things to waive some of the things and make telecommuting easier. Some of them, like for Director Ford, like the Permit Streamlining Act or things like that, have deadlines. I know right now CSAC is working on lobbying to maybe get some of these statutory things lifted, and that's probably the best way, because otherwise we're sort of stuck with whatever the law requires.
Thank you. Yes. CSAC, yes, of course.
Let me get this, but the courts are still operating. Maggie wants to speak to that because
thank you, Director Ford.
she's got her bucket list in her hand.
Welcome, District Attorney Fleming.
Thank you. So with regards to the courts, they are putting a plan in place. I sent emails yesterday. I've reached out to the public defender and conflict counsel and discussing with them that really what we need to do is just go down to those who are in custody and time not waived. Effective immediately, I let my office know we're going to reduce staffing as much as we can because like with so many staffs, we have many, many employees who are responsible for the care of elderly parents and or their children. So I consider them to be in very vulnerable positions. We will not be charging any cases where the person's out of custody and would normally be receiving a letter from us. So rather than saying your next date is April 1st, we're going to wait to file those and then be picking dates in June, July, or August, whenever it's appropriate that the courts will be up and running. Having said that, if I believe someone's a public safety issue, I've let the staff know we're still going to push forward with those and get them into court. I've also let the court know effective immediately, but for preliminary hearings, trials, or any involved sentencings, my attorneys will be appearing by phone. I was on the second floor today at 8:30. It was packed, as it always is. And, given that the government has issued a number of orders as to how we are to be handling this situation, it seems somewhat ironic that at the seat of county government, we're in violation. So I'm really trying to reduce staffing, reducing how much time we spend in court and how much contact we're having with the public. I was on a phone call with all the other electeds over the lunch hour. Many DA's offices have gone to a closed office, so staff is there, but they're not inviting the public in or any others. We're going to be starting that immediately, so we'll still be there to answer phone calls, emails, and handle any charging that comes our way from law enforcement, but we won't be doing business as usual because we simply can't. So that will meet our essential services. We will still be functioning, but obviously trying to reduce the amount of time we're spending in the presence of others and also affecting the public. I've also let Public Defender and Conflict Counsel know, more than happy to continue trials because, as you might imagine, a number of our jurors are retired, so they're elderly. I think it's inappropriate to be asking them to come and sit in a room with 50 or 60 other elderly people. I imagine some of them would be frightened to come, and I also don't want to put them in a position where they're going to violate the order to come to court because they believe it's unsafe.
While I have you, do you have any concerns or input regarding the resolution before us?
Oh, thank you. I was here to actually say I really, really appreciate this. We have many attorneys, as I say, who are not just attorneys, many employees who are responsible for care, and with schools closing, preschools closing, and then obviously also concerns about dealing with the care that they provide to elderly parents. It's just, they really shouldn't have to be here. So I appreciate the fact that we're going to be able to offer this to them. And then I do appreciate, too, the question from Supervisor Madrone, because I do have a number of part-time or extra help employees who will also need this assistance during this time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone, any other department like to address us or share concerns or thoughts? Lisa beat you to it again, Billy.
It's all right, go.
Good afternoon, Board. Thank you very much for entertaining the resolution that you're entertaining. Having conversations back at our office, our staff is concerned about the public interface and would like for you to consider shutting down the public interface. We do have the ability to work with our customers in electronic ways now, and so that would be much appreciated. We too have a number of people with children who won't be coming to work, and folks who take care of elderly or have immune compromised positions. We don't have the capacity to allow them all to telecommute. If you are able to consider widening the flexibility of people's work schedules so that we can maintain space for them, that would be appreciated. If there's a possibility that we can work with the union to allow staff to have a 7-day-a-week work week, that might also be helpful, so that we can have staff there at times when they're not having to caretake. And maintain the distance that is requested. So those two would be helpful.
Bill?
Supervisor Bohn?
On the draft, on attachment 1, at department head's discretion, departments may close and/or limit in-person interactions with members of the public and staff, provided that alternative procedures such as telephonic or web-based services are available.
Okay. That's probably enough for us.
What's that?
That's enough.
Should be enough for everybody, because basically what we're saying, you guys do what you want to do to keep your staff safe.
Thank you.
And it's
They
probably,
appreciate it too.
with all these departments out here, I think it would be ridiculous to think we can micromanage your departments because of the layouts and everything else and the whole function of what you do. So
Yes, and there's too
I
many other
think
things to do.
that covers everything for all department heads to, basically, I think this was the way I read it. It was made up to be very flexible.
Thank you.
And, okay.
Okay, appreciated. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lisa. Welcome, Director Beck.
Hi, Connie Beck, Health and Human Services Director. As you all know, we have a number of mandated and non-mandated programs, and so we are currently going through and working with the state on what can be released as a mandate or postponed, but also really working on making sure that we are able to address all the public's concerns. I know you all are aware of the governor's 65 and older and medically compromised folks should be isolated. And that's going to impact our adult protective services and other areas in home support services and that. So we will be doing our very best. I looked this morning and we have a number of folks that are over 65 that work for us, and a number of folks that might be identified as medically compromised. So we'll be working on that too. I do appreciate this agenda item. We have a number of especially single parents that are going to be without childcare for a bit, so that's going to be a struggle. Just really, if we are working with 25 or 50% of our staff in mandated programs, being able to provide those essential services is going to take a bit. So I'm going to be looking at staff that are in our non-mandated programs to do some of the work in our mandated programs. Somehow we got to get through this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Beck.
60% of your board.
I know, I think
And you're pretty
It's
close.
I'm not that close.
Can I sit down?
Sheriff
Can I
Honsal.
sit down? Thank you. Yes.
Start talking.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this resolution. I appreciate the board's attention to this. This is very serious. I appreciate the tone that this county's taking. Currently, we don't see wide community transmissions occurring in the county, but as we see the models, that could change at any given time. So I'm appreciative of Dr. Frankovich and Public Health and Director Beck, Michelle Stevens-Stantz. We are operating our Office of Emergency Services. Our EOC is open to support the public health declaration, and we are slowly staffing that up. Right now, it is a 8 to 5 operation, but as things kind of anticipate getting a little more busy around here, we could be staffing that 24/7. So we'll be day to day on that operation. As far as the resolution, I think it's, we at the Sheriff's Office are going to alternate schedules. We have offered the telecommuting aspect of things, and we are doing our best. Obviously, as public safety, we don't get a chance to get a day off, and so our employees are expected to be able to be here and to work. We will be reducing services, and only offering those services that are within our essential components aspect of things. So, but we do have one of the biggest liabilities for this county, and that is the jail. And one of the things that we're looking at in our correctional facility is reducing the amount of visitors and programs right now. So our jail has reduced the amount of programs, people coming in from outside. We are doing no contact visits now, and as well as we had an emergency meeting this morning with the CAO and the courts regarding video, the ability to have video conferencing in our courts, so we don't have to transfer the inmates to and from the courts. And thanks to the leadership of the CAO and our IT and our staff, we're going to pull that off and be able to do that. And I think we'll have our first the ability to do that this afternoon. And so it's only because our court staff, IT, and our IT staff from county dropped everything they're doing, focus on this to make it happen. So that took place, and so we're able to make sure that happens, and to keep our inmates safe, keep people safe in the court system, and still have due process and the constitutional rights of our inmates adhered to.
So one of the things in the resolution references the fact that under Code Section 3100, county employees can be designated as disaster service workers. And it seems kind of an interesting situation we're in here, where we're going to actually having people working from home, we're also going to have a lot of stress on the medical end of services. So any challenges there that you can see?
So there are a lot of challenges. One is, you know, our employees have the same issues with childcare, with aging parents that they have to take care of. And, you know, we have the alternative of we work 24/7. So we'll try and find a schedule within our agency that will work for those people. But there may come a time where we need to tap into DHHS and ask for childcare services for our deputies that are, you know, having a bind, you know, single parents that are working with children that rely on those children being in school every day, and now they're not in school. So what do you do with them? And so we're looking into that and trying to find alternatives right now. But it is something that, you know, if there's stress at home, how can you be at work? And but our deputies are doing it, and they're finding a way, and we're figuring it out.
Right. Thank you, Sheriff. Any questions, Supervisor Bohn?
Ryan, can I? Yep. Oh, yes. You can move over a little bit.
Hi, Ray.
Okay, I'm getting multiple phone calls from people wanting to help, because right now, I think we're talking about, you know, we keep talking about 65 and older. You're going to lose the whole south end of the board here, and there'll be 4 of us calling in with Mr. Wilson, so. But I've got quite a few people calling, wanting to help. You're not 65 yet, Virginia. You're not even close, not even close, 47. But as we move towards this, I've got a lot of people wanting to help. And so we have seniors that are perfectly healthy, 65 to 75 and everything else like that. But they're kind of nervous about going out. But people are wanting to offer to do deliveries, you know. Is anybody organizing that? I've got one high school that's, their kids are wanting to do it as a project as long as this lasts. And then going back to probably on the sheriff on dispatch, we have some people that have never been through something like this, and they're shut-ins, or, you know, they're by themselves. Who do they call? I know you don't want 911 getting plugged. Do you want them to call the dispatch number? Are we going to man? I hesitate saying 211 because we don't support that as much, you know.
It is a service. No, it is a service. It's you know, it's a supported nonprofit. So there's a lot of different things that we can do on that aspect of things. One is we work with DHHS. And adult protective services. I mean, and we will probably get to a place where we will be asking for volunteers and working with social services to look out and reach out and making sure that the elderly population is taken care of, is getting things that they need. You know, right now we do have our CERT teams that are out there, and so. And I'll let Ryan talk about our CERT program and our CERT teams that are poised to help and engage those these kind of community functions. So I'll turn it over to our OS manager.
I'd love to maybe put this, you know, the Humboldt Health Alert, which I think is working its way through to being a great resource, but a lot of people don't have the computer. I would love us to reach out to all the radio stations to put PSAs out there, because even if their power or for some other reason, they have their radios. So these people have something to fall back on, because I think the seniors are kind of freaking out a little bit.
When we talk about volunteers, I think it's important that, you know, if people want to volunteer, they affiliate with an existing group. So they're not.
Oh, yeah, you got it. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not used to talking into these things. So we want to make sure that people are volunteering with an affiliate group and not just spontaneously volunteering. So the sheriff alluded to our CERT teams, that's Community Emergency Response Teams. We're looking at using them for resource distribution for local law enforcement, fire, but there's potential for using them for other things as well. So right now, in the absence of community transmission, it's hard to figure out what that model is going to look like. But I think as this progresses, as we start seeing more cases, we can leverage, you know, things like the CERT team or our local COAD to rally together and provide those services.
And I know we don't organize that on a regular basis, because when has this ever happened before? Not. So what I'm saying is I hope we do work with DHHS and the people that have the, you know, the personnel to at least help organize these volunteers. I mean, we can't put it all on the churches or Betty or anything else. It's going to have to be a pretty good regulation. I mean, how are the schools doing it right now? Because I know all the schools are setting up for food deliveries because, I mean, some of these schools that are being shut down for a month have 80% school lunch program, breakfast lunch program. So there's your, we're hitting both ends of our scale of our most vulnerable. So I think as we talk about this and all the other aspects of making sure everybody gets to take care, we better I'm hoping we're looking at the people that aren't here.
Thank you very much, both Sheriff and Ryan. Anybody else who would like to address us? Welcome, Nick.
Hi, Nick Wilczek, Director, Humboldt County Library. Thank you all for your time. So the library is a bit unique in that the vast majority of our employees are frontline staff. In line with other surrounding county and city libraries, I believe the right thing to do is to close all of our libraries for at least the rest of the month. Most of the places I'm seeing are for the rest of the month or through the first few weeks of April. So just as informational that is the course that we are exploring right now, trying to figure out how to make sure that our employees, their income is maintained. We do have online services that can be maintained for the community and for patrons, but to help slow or stop the spread of the coronavirus, the library will be closing for the next couple weeks.
Supervisor Bohn?
There's no way we can distribute books without contact by, we're talking about telling people they can't go anywhere. And oh, by the way, we're not going to let you have books or anything else while you're sitting home, because not everybody has cable, not everybody has, and you are, for a lot of people, last resort. And I'm not saying last resort, sit down. Even Starbucks has pulled all their chairs. So, I'm seeing that, but if we, I know for a fact that planning a building almost gets as many people in their doors as you do. So I'm trying to figure out if we're going to, you have the best ability to probably limit, 3 people at a time in the library for 15 minutes or something like that, but you have to wash or do something. I think for a complete shutdown, unless you have, and if you go to a complete shutdown, it becomes, is there a whole revamping of the library you could do, or do you just send everybody home and then, I'd like to see something a little more creative that we're just not going to be open more than, we're just going to shut down for 2 weeks.
So I just want to remind us that we're basically dealing right now with the resolution regarding staff services and how we can support staff. And as I understand, that's what you were talking about. Okay. Any other department heads that would like to talk with us about their services? And I'd love if we could have someone from IT. Is that possible? No, we don't have anybody from IT here. No?
IT is under my appointment authority, so feel free to ask a question.
Okay, great. So just in that regard, CO Nilsen, is there anything we can do to improve our ability to communicate with the public without having them gather in one place or another? Either telephonically or video interface, something like that?
So there's always options. Last week we were exploring options for video conferencing. We don't necessarily have a lot of that equipment on hand to do that, but we do have conference call equipment, so that is definitely a possibility. The governor's executive order, though, does still require the public to have access to, I believe it still requires the public have access to a meeting location. So you can't limit that, to the best of my knowledge.
It seemed to me that in CSAC's letter to the governor, there was a request to actually strike that, waive that requirement.
My bad then.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're going to go that direction.
It's just in a letter. It's not stone.
Yeah. So, any further input? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for any discussion at the board level. And I guess before I,
You got public comment?
oh, sorry. please forgive me, public comment on this item.
Thank you, Estelle. It's nice when you're only asking department heads that you have a second thing because
Yeah,
we
thank
don't. Kent Sawatsky, strongly support you doing some things we're trying to do here. Right now, those of us who live in Humboldt County have always called it Mother Nature's Ark. The reason it's considered that is because we have the space to get away from each other. I can go to many of my properties and live for 6 months with no problem without any interaction with other people. We do need to take that into consideration in how we deal with the people in Humboldt County. I think the clarity we had here was that the IHHS workers are considered to be extra help. I didn't understand that for sure as far as clarity, because these are the people who are going to be deal with the highest need people, the 65 and older, and people who most likely we need the help. Strongly hope you work with the government, the state, which I understand is their true employers, to make sure they have the same benefits, because those are ones who need to do the work. Being 65, it's up to us now, a lot of us, as being grandparents, to take care of our grandchildren while people work and provide the functions that the rest of society needs at this time. So I don't know what kind of dispensation. We can strongly support what Rex is saying. I had privy to a conversation with one of the major investment firms. They had a 1,500-person phone call all at once, and they were informed they thought potentially the losses would be in the millions as far as deaths go. Our economy is going to crash. There's nobody who's denying that. The biggest thing we have going for us is our separation already. And as you're aware, usually the flus, if this follows the normal trends, when things get warmer, it goes away. It's a seasonal thing. Of course, the vaccine isn't going to be until after next year's flu season, according to 18 months is what they say as far as tested and potentially functional. And this is going to morph each year. I mean, that's just how the flu is. So economically, Rex was starting to bring some things that need to happen. You're going to lose all your small businesses. I even heard of a guy who was in the cannabis business who's not going to do it this year because he doesn't want to touch the money. He does millions. Anyway, this kind of thing and the problems we have here is a little bit above all of our pay grades. Whatever you can do to provide the best you can do for the people here locally. And then, as Rex said, economically, that has to move really fast because 3 weeks, 6 weeks of being shut down, a lot of these businesses run week to week, day to day. Don't know what you can do, but we're going to have to really push really hard to get our share. If there is a federal government left when we come out of this thing, it would be nice to get our share as we go. So I'm not optimistic, but hey, we'll all do what we can do, get together and work together on this. Thank you.
Any further public comment on this item? Bringing back to the board, I will note that there has been also discussion between CSAC and the governor regarding IHSS workers in training in terms of the kind of interface that they'll have with vulnerable public. So we'll be probably having more of a discussion about that, potentially at our board meeting tomorrow when we have a presentation from the DHHS and when we ratify the state of emergency that was declared by Dr. Frankovich. So any further comment? And I was just going to say when I brought it back to the board, I'd like to invite Supervisor Wilson, if you have anything to say, since you've been very quiet so far.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think the discussion was robust and answered all of my questions, and I thought people brought up great perspectives, and I'm ready to vote.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Wilson. Any further comment? So I guess I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion to accept the language presented today, the attached resolution. I thought Supervisor Wilson was going to make the motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and we will have a roll call vote on that.
So we'll start with the first district, Supervisor Bohn.
Sure.
Supervisor Fennell.
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yes.
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Thank you. It is passed unanimously. Thank you to everybody for being here today and for all of your hard work and making sure our county stays safe. And we are adjourned.